Alright, so y'all go ahead and do the factoring and the math knowledge question for today. Pause the video, and then once everyone is finished, you can unpause the video and I'll go over the correct answers. So for the factoring, you're going to want to have x minus 8 times x plus 7. So that would be your answer. For the math knowledge question, when is y not defined? So it's not defined when your denominator equals 0. So when does x plus 3 equal 0? Or when does x minus 4 equal 0? Because if one of these is 0, it won't work because you cannot divide by 0. So that would mean x equals negative 3 or x equals positive 4. So the only one of those that they give you is negative 3. So that would be your answer for your math knowledge question. So we're looking at lesson 14. We're going to disprove conjectures with counterexamples. So we've talked about this back in lesson 7, I believe. So hopefully you'll understand how to use your counterexamples to disprove some conjectures. So a counterexample is an example that proves a conjecture or a statement false. You only need one counterexample. So once you find one, you don't have to keep finding more of them. One counterexample is all you need. So we want to use the conjecture to find the hypothesis and the conclusion and find a counterexample. If a triangle is not obtuse, then it is acute. So the hypothesis will be a triangle is not obtuse. Not if, just a triangle is not obtuse. The conclusion will be it is acute. No then. Remember, you don't use the if and then on your hypothesis and conclusion. So, can anybody think of a counterexample to that conjecture? What about a right triangle? Right triangle is not obtuse, but is it acute? No, so a right triangle would be your counterexample. Alright, so let's look at another one. Find a counterexample to the conjecture. If x plus y is an even number, then both x and y are even numbers. So can anybody think of a counterexample to that one? If you want, you can pause the video if y'all need to think about it a little bit longer. Okay, so for x and y, let's say x is 1 and y is 3. Are x and y even numbers? Neither one of them are an even number, but x plus y is an even number. So that would be a counterexample. X equals 1 and y equals 3. So if both x and y are odd, that's going to be a counterexample. So any x and y values that are both odd will be a counterexample. Now for this one, we want to find a counterexample to this conjecture. So they tell us if 5x minus 10 equals 15, then 2x plus y has to be greater than 9. So let's start by solving for x. So x would equal 5. So if we plug this in, 2 times 5 plus y is greater than 9. So 10 plus y is greater than 9. So if we subtract 10, that means that y has to be greater than negative 1. So a counterexample would be any number for y that is less than negative 1. So if y equals negative 2, this inequality does not work. So pick any number that is less than negative 1. Technically, negative 1 would also work because it has to be greater than 9, not greater than or equal to. So that's how you can find counterexamples. Looking at this one, we want to prove the conjecture false. If the temperature is hotter, then the average amount of rainfall is less. So we start down here, and as we go up, we get hotter. So if the temperature is hotter, it's saying this average amount of rainfall is going to be less. So this 3.4 is less. That's less. Oh, here's where the counterexample is. 82 degrees has 2.7, and it is hotter than 76 degrees, but has more rainfall. So that would be the only counterexample that you would have for this problem. Okay, so let's look at some practice problems. So y'all try these by yourself, and then we'll go over them together. So what is the hypothesis and what is the conclusion? The hypothesis is going to be if line A is perpendicular to line B and to line C. The conclusion is lines B and C are perpendicular. So hypothesis is underlined, conclusion is underlined. Now we want to find a counterexample. So if line A is perpendicular to line B, so this is line A, and this is line C, it says they are both perpendicular, then lines B and C are perpendicular. What does that diagram actually show? Lines B and C are parallel. So that would be your answer for that practice problem. Looking at these two, let's see if you can do them by yourself, and then I will go over the answer. If x squared equals 9, then x equals 3. The hypothesis is x squared equals 9. The conclusion is x equals 3. Your counterexample, any ideas? X equals negative 3. Just because x squared equals 9 doesn't mean that x equals 3. It could also equal negative 3. So that's your counterexample. All right, looking at one more. Y'all try this one by yourself. The masses of two sedimentary rocks are 327 grams and 568 grams respectively. Their volumes are 275 and 501 respectively. Explain how it disproves the conjecture. So it says if a rock is sedimentary, so we have two sedimentary rocks, it says then the mass is proportional to the volume. So mass over volume should be the same for these two. So the mass of the first one is 327 and the mass of the second one is 275. And if you divide that, you get 1.19, and the other one has a mass of 568 and a volume of 501. And if you divide that, you get 1.13. Those are not the same number, so that's how you would disprove it. The mass-volume ratios are not equal, so that means that that statement is not true. All right, so let's look at our challenge question. So y'all try this one, and then we can go over it. So it says, given the algebraic expression a squared plus b squared equals c squared, for any real number a and c, you can solve for a real number b. So one counterexample, I'm going to pick a is 5 and c is 1. So 5 squared plus b squared equals 1 squared. B squared, well, 25 plus b squared equals 1. So b squared would equal negative 24. Can we take the square root of a negative number? Plug that in your calculator. It says error. So that does not work. That's one counterexample. Any counterexample is just going to be A has to be bigger than C. So if A is bigger, that means that it will not work. And if you think about that, that's the Pythagorean theorem. C is your hypotenuse, which is always supposed to be the longest side. So if you have one of your legs that's longer, then you can't use Pythagorean theorem on it because your hypotenuse isn't the longest side. So that's all you're doing on that one basically. So your homework is 1 through 30, so make sure that y'all do those tonight so we can go over any questions you have tomorrow.